Aloha, everyone. So we have our fourth graduate student to present this morning. David Girbino is quite amazing. He not only started a advocacy group here on campus, but he's been instrumental in being a GA for our biology department. And he's really brought forth some beautiful changes to the GA ships, which I think most of our graduate students that are GAs appreciate. He has approached his work through a place of being very humble, knowing that and understanding that his very first internship may have imploded. And he'll talk about that a little bit beforehand, but he took on that challenge of wanting to make a difference, and he's going to really share that with us. Anyway, it's been great having David in multiple classes. He is a fantastic writer, and in fact, if you get a chance to read anything that he's written, I highly recommend it. I've encouraged him to publish and maybe even write a book. And so I expect big things from David. Maybe a PhD, probably a PhD, and it's my pleasure to bring you to the floor.
Mahalo for the introduction, Lisa. And I do have a poem that's going to be in the upcoming edition of the University Literature magazine. So yeah, something to look out for. But aloha mai kako. My name is David Girbino, and welcome to my presentation entitled As Above, So Below, Envisioning Indigenous Microorganism Networks as Foundations of Hawaiian Food Sovereignty. I am so grateful to have you here all today, here and on Zoom, and I'm excited to share these experiences with you. Should probably pick up the clicker, huh? Good place to start. So before we get started, I think it's important for me to establish my positionality as an academic working on sovereign land. I am a queer autistic person of primarily Italian-American heritage from Cleveland, Ohio, the land of the Erie people, which later merged with the Haudenosaunee Nation. I completed my Bachelor's of Science in Evolution, Ecology, and Organismal Biology at the Ohio State University. Oh my goodness, I'm a little nervous. With a minor in creative writing. And I now have the privilege of living and studying here in Hilo, Hawai'i. As has been said many times today already, the sovereign kingdom of Hawaii was overthrown by a coalition of business owners in 1893 with the backing of the United States Marine Corps. The Kingdom of Hawaii never signed a treaty ceding control to the United States or any other foreign entity, and its classification as a state remains illegitimate, as noted in the non-actionable 1993 U.S. apology resolution from President Clinton and the 93 Congress. Only through reparations and land back can we begin to make good on the wrongs against Hawai'i and the Kingdom of Hawaii. So yeah, I'd like to start us off with this olelo noe'au, this poetical saying, which says, "He ali'i ka aina, he kaua ke kinaka." The land is chief, people are its servant. This philosophy I have encountered time and time again over the course of my 3 internships, shared both directly and through the spirit of my mentors' relationships with the aina. It is something I have internalized deeply over the past couple of years. In working with this aina, especially while situated within an academic context, it is vital that we not lose sight of who we are here to serve. Let this olelo noe'au be a call for both students and the university system to remember that we are here first and foremost to steward the aina and steward it well. So what is aina? In Olelo Hawaii, the Hawaiian language, the word for land is aina, meaning that which feeds. Within this word, we find the living earth teeming with nutrients, detritivores, and mycelium, the plants that forge their lives from sun and soil, and the creatures that feed upon their bounty before returning to the earth and her agents of decay. Aina speaks to the universal relationality of being, to the palina, the bonds that connect all living things to each other. The single word encapsulates the entire ecological concept of the food web, yes, but more than that, it reminds us of our place within it. The word mahiai is often translated as farmer, but that too is an oversimplification. I had the privilege of listening to Kaiana Runnels speak on the meaning of mahiʻi recently, and this is what I've learned. Mahiʻi are the cultivators of food, yes, but I is part of Aina. Land is inseparable from food, whether it's feeding plants, animals, or microbes. Mahiʻi then are the scholars and stewards of these relationships, engaged in a generational bond to the land that they serve and to the land that feeds them in turn. The act of farming alone does not make someone a mahiʻi. Like all meaningful relationships, such bonds are formed slowly in the presence of intention, humility, and reciprocity. So as we move through this presentation, I'd like you to keep these definitions in mind. When I speak of Aina, I mean to invoke this network of generational interspecies reciprocity upon which Hawaiian epistemology is founded. And when I say mahiʻi, I mean the stewards of that reciprocity. So let's turn our attention now to food and Hawaii's present-day relationship to it. At any given moment, Hawaii has about a 10-day supply of perishable food, and about 88% of the food that we consume annually is imported. The number is actually substantially higher for staple crops and carbohydrates. Now, with the nearest port of call, 2,400 miles away in Oakland, California, our food system is uniquely susceptible to disruption from natural disasters and geopolitical conflict. This dependency was by design. The same era of plantation owners that acquired 90% of Hawaiian lands before they overthrew the kingdom in 1983 were responsible for converting indigenous Hawaiian agricultural land into monocultures of sugar, putting the extraction of wealth above all else. So how do we get out of this mess? We may find our answer in food sovereignty. The food sovereignty movement aims to restore the independence of Hawaii by breaking its colonially imposed dependence on imported food by providing sustainably produced and culturally meaningful forms of sustenance. At present, only 59% of currently zoned agricultural land is being farmed. And of that land, 86% is non-dairy pasture land, right, for cattle. Another 5% is seed corn for that cattle, as well as foliage and coffee and flowers. This means that less than 9% of currently farmed land is being actively used for food production. And that doesn't even account for the amount of food that we export. How absurd is that? Now people see these numbers and go, oh, we need to dedicate more land to farming. And well, yes, we do, but it's not so simple as converting more land into ag land. How can we better use the agricultural lands we already have? We may find our answer in the practice of agroforestry. So what is agroforestry then? Simply put, it is the intentional cultivation of harvestable tree and shrubs alongside more traditional crops or livestock. Agroforestry has been practiced by indigenous cultures for millennia in myriad forms long before Western ideas and definitions began to take hold. The Amazon rainforest itself is a good example. A recent study found that about half the trees in the remote regions of the Amazon were made up of over just 1% of the total species found there. About 20 of these species were domesticated species like the ice cream bean and the Brazil nut, suggesting that the human history of occupation that reaches back over 13,000 years has influenced the abundance of certain desirable species over time, making the Amazon rainforest a sort of anthropogenic creation in a sense. It is a manifestation of that relationship. More tangible examples, perhaps, can be found in the vibrant milpa forest gardens of the Maya in Mexico and the Quijamba forest gardens of the Chaga people in Tanzania. Pictured in this slide here is the milpa system, a 25-year cycle of agriculture that starts with a Three Sisters garden, that's corns, beans, and squash, augmented with herbs, tubers, and pest-attracted species to reduce crop loss. Faster yielding fruit trees are then interplanted and come to fruition in 2 to 3 years, followed by slower yielding fruit trees, forming the true forest garden. And then finally, after about 25 years, the hardwoods are ready for harvest, using for building materials. The forest is cut, burned, and allowed to rest before the cycle begins anew. The Quijamba forest gardens of the Chaga people are designed to mimic the montane wet forests of their climate zone. And while the foundation of this system is banana, it includes over 500 different food species, both introduced and native, providing food, timber, fodder, and animal habitat. And then, of course, we have Hawaiʻi. So the history of agroforestry in Hawaiʻi. Before the arrival of Captain Cook in 1778, the population of the Hawaiian Islands was estimated to have been somewhere between 200,000 and 800,000, based on the estimated productivity of historically cultivated land and early written records, although some scholars theorize that the population may have exceeded 1 million. According to historical records and contemporary geospatial modeling done by Noah Lincoln and Thegan Leibfoget, dryland agricultural systems were the primary source of food production across Hawaiʻi Island before European contact, supported by 3 staple crops: ulu, or breadfruit, kalo, or taro, and uala, or sweet potato. Remarkably, only 15% approximately of the surface of the Hawaiian Islands was occupied and cultivated in the years before Cook's arrival, driving home the concept of aina momoa, the fat lands, the abundant lands. Food produced in such abundance that the population could be fed with only 15% of the land under cultivation, leaving ample space and habitat for native plants and wildlife. So what did such abundance look like? A prime example of traditional Hawaiian agroforestry systems was the kalu'ulu, a stretch of land in Kona, Hawaiʻi, described as a miles-long belt of open canopy ulu, mountain apple, and candlenut trees interplanted with uala, paper mulberry, yams, bananas, turmeric, Polynesian arrowroot, and dryland kalo. This sprawling, sophisticated agricultural system was able to support a population of up to 1 million people, and it may guide us forward on the path towards restoring food sovereignty to Hawaiʻi. So now, modern agroforestry has taken on specific qualifiers in the way that it likes to, under the supervision of the USDA. And agroforestry is defined as the intentional combination of at least 2 of the 5 core methods to achieve specific benefits. So first, let's consider the 4 I's of agroforestry. You must be intentional, intensive, integrated, and interactive. The 5 methods are listed here, and I'm going to go through each one of them in turn. Alley cropping is the planting of trees or shrubs in sets of alternating rows to allow for shade, mulch, weed barriers, and simplified or mechanized harvesting. The figure on the right here is an example of what alley cropping can look like in a system. Forest farming, or multi-story cropping, is the intentional cultivation of edible, medicinal, or even decorative crops beneath an actively planted native or planted woodland. The figure at the bottom here demonstrates an example of this sort of forest farming system with turmeric and sweet potato in the lower layer, papaya and banana in the middle, and coconut and madre de cacao, which is a great nitrogen fixer, in the top. Riparian forest buffers are installations of trees, shrubs, or vegetation alongside the banks of bodies of water like streams, rivers, and wetlands. This vegetation catches and filters farm runoff before it reaches the water, preventing the outwashing of fertilizers and providing soil stabilization to the banks. Silvopasture is the combination of trees, forage plants, and livestock in a heavily intensively managed system. The livestock graze to keep the weeds down in the shade of the trees, depositing manure that acts for fertilizer in return. And then finally, the windbreaks are rows of trees and shrubs planted for the protection of other crops inside that area. They serve as means of protecting damage and as well as buffering against both pests and pesticide drift. And that brings me to my first internship. Sort of a long walk, huh? So the start of my first internship experience saw me pair up with a group called Pahoehoe LLC. My mentor, Asia Grande, is a doctoral candidate at MIT, and she had reached out to the TCBES program looking for someone to assist in the development of an agri-solar farm. Her uncle Suta had been given a 42-acre parcel of land down in the Moko of Puna in the Ahupua'a of Kahena, just behind the Kalani Oceanside Retreat Center, by his Hanai auntie. He and Asia had a vision of a hybrid food forest and solar farm that would provide renewable energy and sustainable organic food to the Puna community, and they were looking for help getting the project off the ground. Now, staking my internship on a project still in its infancy was, as Lisa mentioned, a bit of a risk, but I saw the passion and the good intention of my new collaborators, and I decided to give it a shot. Because Asia and Suta both live in Oahu, I was the one who was most regularly able to visit the land itself. I began spending time with the Aina here, trying to learn the names of the plants and the history of the land, because I felt that it was important for me to connect with place before trying to do any sort of work there. This was the first place in Hawaii that I really began to form my own palina, my own relationships to place, and understand what Aina meant to me. I spent a good deal of time here wandering around in the forest, getting to know the species, conducting a biodiversity survey, and putting together a guide to better orient myself to their names and habits. So once I had, formed this beginnings of a relationship, I began to work for the startup itself. In January of 2022, I led a group of MIT students who were studying remote sensing and drone imaging for the canopy identification of tree species, down to the forest in Gehenna, where I led them in an oli, a Hawaiian chant, to share our breath, purpose, and intentions with the land. I then shared with them the species guide that I had assembled, introduced them to the plants, and helped them set up transects to survey for the presence of fire ants and arthropods. In this photo here, one of the field leaders of that trip is taking a core of, I believe, a trumpet tree, which really let out a stream of water when they pulled it out. It broke the columnar pressure. But the other major portion of my internship with Pahoehoe LLC was the grant writing. I wrote my very first grant for the Hawaii Forest Stewardship Program, proposing a preliminary agroforestry and ohia conservation site. A few months later, we were awarded that grant, which is exciting. Yeah, I also wrote the Western Sustainable Agricultural Research and Foundation grant, but unfortunately we did not get that one. Funnily enough though, I ended up working for the Hawaii Ulu Cooperative, who was the group that got that grant. So full circle. So here's an example of the general plan I proposed for the development of this agroforestry site. I started with a land survey, which revealed 2 distinct soil zones. The area highlighted in yellow here represents 10 acres of malama, which is extremely cobbly lava rock, populated by some very healthy ohia trees, probably around 100 years old, and a thick ground cover of aluhe ferns. The other soil zone, which represents these other 3 colors here, was called hakuma, a highly organic hydrous loam soil. And it's much older, characterized by full canopy of mango, albizia, trumpet trees, and gunpowder trees, with an understory of things like hala, guava, melosia, and so much more. This rich soil was occupied heavily with invasive species, however, and so this became the proposed site of the agroforest. So first I sectioned off the younger area here, the younger soil with the ohia trees, and decided that we would fence this in and make it a preserve with a nature trail to run through it. I then proposed that the solar panels and educational facility go along the roadside here so they would have access to the electrical lines. It's kind of important. And finally, the educational center as well. This was a space we planned to have a communal medicinal and herbal garden where people could come and take cuttings, an indoor space for hosting community events and cultural practitioners, and a place from which we could lead guided tours of the agroforest and solar site to get that information out there. And then behind, of course, we had plans for the agroforest itself, which we envisioned as a combination of native and canoe plant species like coconut, sugarcane, ulu, and kukui, alongside high-value crops like edible figs and passion fruit. So even though we did secure the FSP grant, it was unfortunately more of a reimbursement-based thing. And due to our lack of upfront funds, we came to a bit of a halt. So the project is now on hold and the stakeholders are considering their options and how to move forward. But I needed to continue on with my master's program, so I turned my attention to a summer agroforestry job posting by the Hawaii Ulu Cooperative. So I was lucky enough to get the job with the co-op, which is actually a grant-funded position through the Clean Energy Leadership Institute and their Empowering Diverse Climate Talent Cohort Program, or EDICT. As agroforestry intern, I was tasked with assisting my mentor, Kyle Jackson, with member intake, field visits to our 120 plus member farms, foliage and soil sampling for our members. I also completed guides to ulu disease and nutrient deficiencies, as well as planting guides to co-crops like pumpkins, sweet potato, and kalo. All of this work was in service of the co-op's mission to revitalize breadfruit as a viable crop and dietary staple by empowering farmers as change makers in Hawaii's food system. So why ulu? Why would we dedicate an entire farming cooperative to a single plant, right? Well, ulu is one of the only staple crops in the world that grows on trees. It is also deeply culturally significant to Hawaii. Ulu is a kino lau, one of the many forms of the body of the god Ku. The tree itself has been used for all kinds of things. The lightweight wood can be used for canoes and homes. The sap is an adhesive for wound care, bird catching, caulking, and waterproofing. The tree bark can be pounded into a fibrous dark cloth known as kapa, and the fruit, of course, can be roasted, steamed, boiled, or pounded into a type of poi. The dried leaves and sheath buds can be used as polishers for bowls and kukui nuts, and the leaves themselves can be brewed as medicinal herbal infusion. It's truly an incredible plant. One ulu tree can live for 50 to 100 years, reaching fruiting age between 2 and 3 years. At maturity, one tree can produce an average of between 100 and 250 pounds of food per year. They are also effective at sequestering atmospheric carbon, and the root systems hold down the topsoil and facilitate the exchange of nutrients and water. And finally, of course, they're very nutritious, rich in dietary fiber, complex carbohydrates, vitamins like potassium, calcium, vitamin A, and C. So the biggest portion of my internship with the co-op was our agroforestry project. I'm extremely excited about this. This project is an ongoing collaboration between the Hawaii Ulu Cooperative, a software company called Overyield, which has developed a platform for modeling and tracking the productivity of agroforestry systems, and OK Farms, a family-owned and sustainably oriented farm just across the Wailuku River and from Hilo in the hills of Pu'ue'o-Mauka. The goal is to create a sustainable model of agroforestry in Hawaii from the ground up, tracking all of the costs, labor, species, and productivity that goes in and comes out through Overyield's digital modeling system. We designed an initial plan in the software system, laid out the placement of the species, created a model of expected inputs, outputs, harvest, and profit. The goal now is to carry out that model in the field, definitively establishing for the first time at this scale an economic viability model of agroforestry in Hawaii. This project is hugely exciting to me, and what started as a cleared 5-acre plot of former rambutan orchard quickly has developed into rows of over 200 ulu trees, thousands of pumpkins, kalo, sugarcane, coffee, and more. Just last weekend, we added another 450 coffee trees and another 500 kalo keiki. So I wanted to show you guys the original model of the farm that we created in Overyield. This is what our map looked like, with each species indicated by their own color and each individual by a single dot. Now you'll notice, those of you who've been to the site in person, that things look a little bit different on the ground. Turns out that the ins and outs of running an agroforest like this in practice don't always match up to the original plans. The biggest change so far has been an installation of a gravel road from the gate in the middle of that pink line there by following the green arrow down to the middle of the field. And this road allows us to drive in supplies, farm equipment, and loads of mulch to a much more centralized location. So here we have a base model of Overyield's calculations for yield. This was a yield slide. So it's based on calculations of ages of maturity, average yields of plants per acre or per plant over time. And the software allows us for the tracking of all of the inputs as well. So this is essentially how we're going to be able to visualize the viability of agroforestry over time. This is just a base example. So one of the minor setbacks that we encountered during this project was the issue of the pumpkins. At the start of my internship, I spent many hours out here on my own, planting well over 1,000 pumpkin starts in the soil, mostly with my bare hands. And however, as the months wore on, we learned a few things. First, that our pumpkins would be happier with some companion plants like corn and beans. And second, that we needed to dedicate more labor to weeding said pumpkins than we could justify on our own. There was just too many hands needed elsewhere on OK Farms' 800 plus acres of managed farm. So this led me to organize the first of what would become monthly volunteer events on the farm. The word began to spread through the co-op, the OK Farms Ohana, and the university system, and soon we had folks coming up from all across the community to help out and connect with this wonderful place together. We had multi-generational families come out, groups from Kamehameha schools, Go Farms, and so many more. I've taken on a more active leadership role in the most recent volunteer events, leading small demonstrations of fertilizer mixing, planting, huli preparation, the harvesting of leaf and corn, as well as the distribution of sign-up sheets, the setting up of event stations and shelters. Our event on March of 2023 was one of the most rewarding days of my life, actually. We had more than 30 people from the community come out to partake. In all, we harvested over 600 pounds of kalo corn from the first field that we had planted just 10 months before, as well as 200 plus pounds of leaf, and producing over 2,000 keiki for us to replant and gift to the community. There was such a joy to be found in this field that day, and in going home with the food that I had planted, being able to feed my friends with it. That's the kind of feeling I think we could spend our whole lives chasing if we don't know where to look. And I feel so blessed to have found it there. So while my internship with the co-op ended last August, I remain an active member of these community work days, and I will be continuing to collaborate with the co-op throughout the summer. Now, I'd like to shift focus a little bit to a topic that I kept crossing paths with throughout my internship with the co-op: Indigenous microorganisms, or IMOs. Simply put, IMOs are the microscopic bacteria, protozoa, nematodes, and fungi that are naturally found in the soil. This incredibly diverse class of organisms is woven into the history of the natural world in ways we are just beginning to understand, and their roles are myriad. Some are decomposers, some help regulate nutrient efficiency and uptake in plants, and certain types are now being found to facilitate the exchange of information between plants as if they were speaking to each other, like a forest neural network. IMOs are remarkable, but they're fragile too. These tiny creatures are sensitive to sunlight and disturbance, and human activities like deforestation and farm tilling are often fatal for them. Conventional agricultural practices have been devastating for our IMO communities, and its impacts are just beginning to be recognized by Western academia. Make no mistake, however, IMOs have been a part of indigenous agricultural practices for millennia. In pre-colonial Hawaii, Kanaka Maoli knew that there were creatures in the soil that their eyes could not see, and they knew that they played a vital role in the aina and the cultivation of it. These invisible creatures were called akua, a term reserved for gods and deities. The mahiai saw the work of the gods in the soil long before anyone had constructed the lenses required to see them. In the book Native Planters of Old Hawaii by E.S. Handy, he describes a traditional method of pit mulching in which a stand of kukui trees or tree ferns, hapu'u, would be cleared in a forest. A large hole would be dug there, and the wood and the foliage would be left to bury and decompose into a rich humus. The kalo planted here were said to be huge, over 20-pound corms, fed by the bounty of the forest. And while it's not stated outright, because of course it couldn't be, this practice is allowing for the breakdown of a nitrogen-rich tree by the inclusion of IMOs from the forest, right? This is the same practice that we're doing when we go out with our baskets to harvest IMOs from the forest, creating these massive mulch pits on such a grand scale to feed their communities. It's truly incredible. So, the experience that really convinced me of the incredible transformative power of IMOs was a co-op farm tour event held by Ginger John Caverly at Sweet Cane Farms. Ginger John was one of the first people to advocate for Korean natural farming, or KNF, here in Hawaii, alongside Master Chohan Kyu and Dr. Hoon Park. We'll dig into KNF in depth soon, but for now, just know that it is a natural farming system that combines the cultivation of IMOs with traditional medicines, lactobacillus cultures, and other natural amendments to tend crops and build soil. Ginger John described the land when he first arrived as barren. There wasn't a single blade of grass left alive. Previous owners had tried conventional methods and applied methyl bromide to fumigate the soil before they left. He had tried planting kalo and sweet potatoes, but everything was dying. He had tried applying fertilizers, but the plants would only survive until they ran out. Things were looking bad until John met Dr. Hoon Park, a pediatrician from Kona, who had taken interest in Master Cho's KNF program. They began making their IMOs together and quickly found that the use of them, combined with the planting of pigeon pea, a nitrogen-fixing plant, resulted in the development of a living soil rife with earthworms and mycelium. Over the next few years, John was able to develop a rich, dark soil on once poisoned ground, as you can see in the photo at the top of the slide there. Truly incredible earth. Sweet Cane Farm was a revelation to me. There is so much life there beneath our feet, a sprawling farm reborn from a desert of poisoned soil. I saw firsthand how indigenous microorganisms can transmute the hazardous into the benign, and I could not look away. And that brings me to a little bit of a turn here. I had spent my summer planting the agroforest with the co-op at OK Farms, focused on diverse crops to sustainably feed our community. But as I was laying beneath the canopy of the kalo one afternoon, I remembered the phrase, as above, so below. Had I spent so much time focusing on the kalo stretching out above me that I had forgotten about our soil below? I decided to dive into this phrase to better understand what it meant and where it comes from. I'm sure many of you have heard it before, perhaps in comparing something on a large scale to something small, the macro to the micro. It turns out that this phrase is derived from an ancient text called the Emerald Tablet, one of the foundational texts of the study of alchemy. Alchemy, of course, is a pseudoscience popularized by the Arabic, Chinese, and European scholars in the Middle Ages who sought to turn lead into gold and discover the secrets of eternal life. It's outlandish, I know, but bear with me here. A translation of the original Arabic goes like this: that which is above is from that which is below, and that which is below is from that which is above, working the miracles of one thing. Feed the earth from that which is subtle with the greatest power. That's when it clicked for me. Ginger John had taught us that once you restore the Aina, all you have to do is feed it, and it takes care of the rest. IMOs are like the alchemists of the Aina. We feed the earth with these subtle creatures, and they have the power to remediate the world of harm that we have done. So it may sound out there, but the Western world is beginning to recognize the awesome abilities of fungi that have just been recognized by indigenous communities for millennia, right? Here's just a few examples of headlines touting how mushrooms can eat plastics, clean up oil spills, and perhaps even save the world. Soil health and biodiversity is not a given thing. Decades of exploitative agriculture and ranching have drained, poisoned, and compacted the soil here in Hawaii. So if we are to envision a Hawaii of abundance, we must heed the call to return to Aina, to renew our relationships with the land and begin fostering diversity both above and below. This is a call that has been booming since the Hawaiian Renaissance, made manifest in more communities and Kanaka-led organizations than I can count, and I claim no ownership of it. I am just one human who, with their hands in the Aina, heard the call and wanted to use their platform to share it. Ancient leaf tea now. This IMO awakening, if you will, led me to seek out a third and final internship, where I might explore the ins and outs of natural farming. I had the incredible fortune to cross paths with Susan Schultz of Ancient Leaf Tea, a fully organic and regenerative tea farm in Pahoehoe, Hawaii. As her graduate intern, Susan has been training me in Korean natural farming techniques and the cultivation of IMOs. I've also gotten to partake in the planting, weeding, and mulching that is instrumental in natural farming, and I've even brought some friends to help out. I've also been using my writing experience to develop farm practice documents and advertisement materials for her. So a brief summary of KNF, since we're running short on time here. And what I've learned from Susan is that there are 9 key components of KNF. We have IMOs, lactobacillus cultures, fermented plant juices, fruit or grain vinegars, tinctured herbal medicines, bone char for structure, fish amino acids for protein synthesis, calcium for fruiting, and diluted seawater for all of the micronutrients required for life. These 9 components are combined in a variety of ways to care for the land like we might care for our human bodies. Probiotics, vitamins and minerals, special foods, and herbal medicines. In the photo on the right here, I am preparing fermented plant juice using papaya, guava, and banana from the farm. This kind of food is used then to support plant growth, as it contains the same profile of nutrients and plant hormones required for such growth. You give what you need back. KNF is for everyone. One of the most important things I've learned about KNF is that it was designed to be accessible. Most of the supplies needed for it are household items such as rice, brown sugar, glass jars and yard, farm, and grocery items like fish, fruit, and plant material. The system itself is fairly intuitive, and while it requires a significant amount of time to get established, there are classes that train farmers in the methodologies here. The result is a regenerative, resilient agricultural system that can operate without the need for imported fertilizers and amendments. But that said, it's not a perfect system. It relies on imported components like rice and medicinal plants and brown sugar for various tinctures and applications. And so there's therefore a very clear need for a Hawaii-based version of natural farming that can be implemented using only the things that can be produced sustainably on island. So what comes next? Well, there are a ton of incredible people working to spread agroforestry, IMOs, and natural farming techniques across Hawaii right now, including my various internship partners. The OK Farms Agroforest has recently brought in Seth and Evan, two incredible kalo growers, and under their watch, the site is quickly developing into a biodiversity that rivals below the ground, which is above, which is really wonderful to see. The co-op, of course, continues to grow as well, their work manifesting both in the field and on the kitchen table of homes across the islands. Overall, I am very hopeful for the future of food sovereignty in Hawaii. I can feel the excitement and energy around it. And I think that with projects like the OK Farms Agroforest coming together, we might have a better shot at getting more state and federal investment in food systems to support food sovereignty. There's a lot to unpack there, I know. As for me, I will be continuing my work with OK Farms and Ancient Leaf Tea through the summer, and I'm going to continue building my relationship to the Aina as I learn the ins and outs of natural farming. I hope to connect with more mahiaya across Hawaii to get a sense of the current needs and roadblocks facing the natural farming community here. And because I am well suited to academia, I intend to pursue a PhD to meet some of those needs how I can. I'm not sure what shape my work will take in the future, but I am here to serve as a steward of place, to support the sovereignty of Hawaii and Malama the Aina however I can. So mahalo nui loa to all of my wonderful collaborators, to Lisa Canali, the internship advisor, the opportunities and funding provided by the graduate assistantship that I have, Asia Grande and Sutakara Union at Pahoehoe LLC, Kyle Jackson, Donna Shapiro, Kenta Nomoto, and the HUC crew, Edict, Seeley, and the Elemental Accelerator staff, Troy and Alakeo Lanui at OK Farms and their ohana, Susan and Arthur Schultz at Ancient Leaf Tea, John Caverly at Sweet Cane Farms, Emma Steerhoff, Hannah Hartman, and Sienna Lee Dowd for their endless support both in the field and at home, to the TCBES cohort, and all of the incredible volunteers who have come out to help at these different farm sites. Mahalo. Yeah, I'd be happy to take questions if we have time.
Why don't we go ahead and open up for 1 or 2 questions? So, audience?
No, well, yeah.
What do you think is the greatest roadblock towards food sovereignty?
The greatest roadblock to food sovereignty is probably funding. It is extremely hard to be a productive farm in Hawaii right now. I did an interview with Troy Keolanui of OK Farms, and he was talking about how if they struggle to make this happen, then how are small scale farms supposed to, right? 75% of farms in Hawaii are less than 9 acres. So we need to find ways to get the resources and funding necessary for natural farming out to the community, and to form coalitions of farmers to support each other and get the information out there that's necessary to create these sustainable systems, even without input from government.
I have so much, and this isn't even a question, but you inspire me every day, and the work that you do is amazing. And so I have so much aloha and mahalo to give to you, and your fight in the Hawaiian sovereignty movement coming from this food angle is beyond words. So thank you so much.
Mahalo for that. I appreciate it. Checking on Zoom.
The Zoom is getting started.
Aw.
Oh, just love.
Thanks, you guys. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
All right, well, I have a question about the PhD.
Of course.
So how do you see that shaping up? Like, what is that? What's the driving question that you want to explore?
I think it's less about what I want to explore and what the community needs from me. So, I have some conversations to have. I've got some people to meet. And once we've put together a big picture of where natural farming needs to go and what the blocks are to that, I will do my part to make those happen.
Wonderful. Well, on that note, I just want to say thank you once again.